Welcome to today's webinar, 10 Common Equipment Management Profit Leaks. Thank you all for attending this. I know life is crazy for everybody right now, and we appreciate you taking the time to participate and listen to this webinar. My name is Herb Brownett, and I am the presenter today. As you can see, I spent my career in construction financial management. But as you can see from the picture, I'm very operations oriented, both in terms of field work and equipment. I clearly understand how money is made and lost in a construction company, and it's not in the office. I got to the field every chance I got and spent a lot of time in the shop because that's what these companies are all about. You can also see that I was CFO of Brubacher Excavating, a large site work contractor, and a long-term B2W user that uses all of the B2W elements. At Brubacher, I came to understand two things. First, that the equipment fleet is a huge cost center, and it can leak bottom line profit like a sieve if you don't manage it, and that most of the profit leaks can be mitigated by utilizing B2W's solutions. So here's what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to identify 10 of the most common profit leaks. I'm going to explore their financial impact. I'm going to talk about stopping them with B2W. And then at the end, we'll have questions. There are B2W representatives participating who may answer some of the more specific questions along the way, but we will deal with the general questions at the end. We schedule this for 30 minutes. However, if our time runs over, we will stay and answer questions. And those of you that are able, please stay on. So let's get started. Profit leak number one, manual field time entry. It always amazes me in my consulting travels how many large, even very sophisticated companies still don't have automated field time reporting. This, of course, is a major inefficiency. People are entering data on one form or another and then re-entering it somewhere else, which always creates errors. And then more importantly, you also lack real-time data in the field. It doesn't do a pipe superintendent any good to know that his production 2 weeks ago on a certain day wasn't very good. He needs to know that the next day. So enter B2W Track, B2W's mobile field reporting solution. You have electronic data capture. It's real-time submission. You have increased accuracy because the data is only entered once. The superintendent enters it on his laptop or his iPad is in the picture, and that is the data. It moves through the system. It also gets interfaced directly to job cost accounting systems, so there's never any data transfer. I'll just as a quick note, I know there are a lot of folks, Mortensen folks on the call, and they're a great B2W client. And if you'll notice this gentleman's vest, I believe that says Mortensen. Number two item, that's one of my favorites, the weekly schedule meeting. Now, I know at Brubacher, we used to every week on Wednesday in the afternoon for 2 hours, the COO, the Director of Field Operations, the Fleet Manager, some key project managers, and some other important folks would assemble in the conference room, and they would do the scheduling of people. They would update the 2-week look ahead for people and equipment. And they actually did it on an Excel spreadsheet that was projected, not a whiteboard, but a lot of companies still use the whiteboard. Well, this is really an inefficient use of valuable management time. And it's immediately out of date, probably before the meeting's finished. Things just change too quickly. So with B2W Schedule, you have a centralized online tool where what you see on the whiteboard is in a central computerized solution. People can go in and look at it. People with appropriate permissions can move things around, and it has enterprise-wide visibility. And I know that Brubacher now has a 30-minute remote type meeting, conference call, rather than the 2-hour meeting, which also involves about an hour of travel time for some of those people. I did a quick calculation one time and calculated that was about $3,500 a week of time, which adds up to about $182,000 a year. Now you may say, well, but that's not a real savings because you wouldn't let those people go anyway. They're salaried, and that's true, but it's the opportunity cost of that time. That director of field operations could have been out on a project solving a production problem. Those project managers could have been working on change orders. The fleet manager could have been working on better deployment of equipment. And so you see that there's a lot of benefit to that. It's the value of the opportunity cost of the time. At number 3, we have inefficient equipment usage. I want to get into 2 key terms here. One is deployment and the other is utilization. Deployment is getting equipment where it is needed, and utilization is actually using it when it's there at the face of the work. If you're not scheduling your equipment properly, you can lower the deployment. You might have one piece of equipment sitting in a yard that could be used, and somebody is renting that same piece of equipment unnecessarily. You will also not be recovering ownership costs when you don't utilize the equipment. I'm going to talk about that more under another one of the leaks. And then you have high transportation costs because you're always running pieces of equipment around to get it to the right job and to plug the holes. We have one B2W client who reported a couple of years ago that using the B2W schedule solution, they were able to take their lowboy fleet down from 4 to 3. That's a savings of about $150,000 a year. And of course, B2W schedule is the way you deal with this. Over time, you'll better use your equipment across all your jobs. Another one is equipment hoarding. This is where the superintendent, this is his favorite dozer, and he isn't going to use it until next week, but by golly, he didn't want to let it go because he might not be able to get it back, or the one he gets may not be as good, so he's just going to hang on to it. Well, that lowers the deployment and the utilization, obviously, and you have the same issues. You're not recovering ownership costs, and there's unnecessary rental costs. Once again, if you're using B2W schedule, you can see where these things are, and then combined with track, you can see whether it's being used, and you can, when you call up the superintendent and say, hey, we want that dozer back, he says, oh, yeah, I'm using it. Oh, well, you can push back on that if necessary. So very costly. The next one, unrecovered warranty costs. As you know, probably know, equipment comes with a car. We call it bumper to bumper with a piece of equipment. I call it radiator to blade warranty. And if you have a large enough fleet, keeping up with the original warranties is a challenge, especially when you get near the end. You have a major component go out on a piece of equipment. You think, gee, I know we bought it about then. Is it out from under warranty or not? You got to scramble around and find out. But also replacement parts. A lot of replacement parts, hydraulic pumps, and maybe an alternator or something, they come with a warranty, and you need to track those. They're not in and of themselves high-priced items, but across time and across volume, they add up. Just as an example, say you have a $2,000 component, which is probably on the low side for some of this stuff, and you miss warranty recovery on one per week. That's pretty conservative if you have a fleet of any size. Well, you do the math, that's over $100,000 a year that you could have recovered. So with B2W Maintain, you have automated warranty tracking, both on the original warranties and the replacement parts, so that when you go to replace a part, you'll get a message and it'll say, hey, this is under warranty, and you can recover the costs. The next one is keeping equipment too long. When you keep a piece of equipment too long, you have skyrocketing maintenance costs. You have increased unscheduled downtime, which I'm going to talk about more in a little while, and you tend to deploy it less. Now, with the permission of Mike Vorster of CEMP Central. Some of you may know Mike. He's quite the equipment guru. This graph shows the typical hourly cost of a piece of equipment. You have the owning cost tends to go down over time as you depreciate it, and you really should use accelerated depreciation in the early years, so there's a bend in the curve. Repair costs tend to go up fairly linearly, so the total cost goes up at a fairly steady trajectory, but the cost per hour bends down, and there's actually a sweet spot, and somewhere in here is where you ought to really think about replacing the piece of equipment. What's really scary is if you take this out too far, this repair cost line, and therefore the total line and cost per hour, all those lines go hockey stick if you wait too long. I have one client where the first year I went in, I noticed that all their equipment was old, and they said, I made a comment about that, and they said, well, it really doesn't cost us anything because it's fully depreciated. Well, they're thinking about this line, and they're not thinking about that line. And don't you know, I came back the next year, and their repair costs, and now I have 20 pieces of equipment, their repair costs had doubled in 1 year, and they were shocked. But I resisted the urge to say, I told you so. So with B2W Maintain, you have the historical data analysis necessary to evaluate when it is you should get rid of a piece of equipment and avoid all those previous profit leaks. Next item is inefficient maintenance. Inefficient maintenance. And this has to do with these very valuable mechanics that you have. They're well paid, they're hard to get, and they drive around these expensive trucks, and you certainly want to use them as efficient as possible. But in the absence of an automated solution, you'll have poor scheduling of work. You'll have manual work orders, which take a lot of time to fill out, and collectively you'll have low wrench time. If you bring in B2W Maintain, you have online work orders. So when they go to do a work order, whether it's a regularly scheduled maintenance or a typical repair, there'll be a work order already in there. They can click on it. It tells them all the steps they need to do, all the parts they need. You can automate their schedules and make them efficient. And of course, it has mobile capabilities. So if they get out there and they find something else wrong, they can go ahead and prepare a new work order and start working on it. And then another feature in terms of accelerating that wrench time is that if you have another piece of equipment on the site they're going to, you can, the system will tell them, hey, while you're here, there's this excavator over here that's due for a 2,000-hour service in about 50 hours, and you can go ahead and do that while we're here. Very powerful. I don't think anybody's going to cut any mechanics, but you can certainly do more with the same and benefit from that. Next is my biggie, unscheduled downtime. This is where a piece of equipment is at the face of the work. You actually deployed it to the right place. They need it. They want to run it, and they can't use it for some repair issue. I call this the great profit killer because there's so many dimensions to it. But let me start first of all by saying you've heard me reference recovery and ownership costs on previous slides. You recover the cost of your equipment by charging it to job costs and then recovering it through the contract value you receive on job costs. And if you're not doing that over time, you're really burning up your equipment. As Mike Vorster likes to say, you're eating your company's seed corn. Well, just as an example, I know in my part of the world, a D8 dozer the ownership cost currently is about $30 an hour. The gold standard for unscheduled downtime is 5%, which means you have 95% uptime. But the industry average of downtime is about 25%. Well, that 20% differential is about $9,000 a year on that piece of equipment. And that in and of itself might not sound like a lot of a big number, but that's an average across a fleet. So if all your dozers and excavators and backhoes and everything are averaging 25% downtime, you can meet, that's $900,000 a year of unrecovered costs. And then there's more costs to this. You have potential rental costs. The work has to get done on a project, and you may have to go out, somebody may have to go out and rent a piece of equipment to cover that piece of equipment, maybe for that day or longer. That type of equipment here costs about $640 a day. If over the work days of a year, you're renting one piece of equipment a day across your fleet that you don't have to, that's $160,000 a year. So that is significant. But the biggest cost is the one that's hardest to measure, which is overall project disruption. These projects are scheduled pretty tight. The superintendent, good superintendents, they have a work plan every day. They have a 2-week plan, and that all relies on equipment operating. Okay. I always like to say, I've never seen an estimate that has a line item called unscheduled, the productivity impact of unscheduled downtime, and yet it occurs. Well, what's the solution? The solution is good preventative maintenance, and you accomplish that with B2W Maintain. So number 9 really reflects on all the previous ones. This is not measuring results. You can't improve what you don't measure, and so it's having easy access to data is critical. You need to measure current results versus industry standards. And in terms of that data, sometimes it's unstructured and inconsistent at companies. People pull it from here and there and all, and that's problematic. I personally feel like you're better having no data than bad data, because sometimes you can really get to incorrect decisions. Well, B2W improves data capture and analysis with automation and structure. There are the ability to calculate certain critical metrics is built in to B2W Maintain, and I'm going to go through some of them. Just as a disclaimer, though, I want to say that some of the components directly feed from Maintain, and some of them you have to enter yourself. Just as an example, this maintenance cost as a percent of revenue. B2W will know what the maintenance cost is, but won't know what the revenue is. That's just an example. So I want to make it clear it's not totally automated, but the mechanism is in there, and these are really good metrics. So I'm going to go through each of them quickly. This one is a good measure of your maintenance spend versus the relative size of your company as measured by revenue. If you're spending more than 5%, your maintenance costs are out of line, either due to, any number of things. Preventative maintenance is a percentage of total maintenance hours. You really ought to be spending 60% of your time, mechanics time, on preventative maintenance. If you're not, then you're not doing enough, because what happens is when you spend less, as the red gets less, the gray gets greater, not only mathematically, but in reality, because you have more emergencies and more unscheduled downtime. Maintenance as a percentage of overtime hours is a measure of mechanics efficiency. And if your mechanics are working 30 or 40% overtime, that means you have an efficiency issue, and you also may have a staffing issue. But you need to know that because that's expensive. I believe we all understand that when people work too much, those incremental hours at the end are more expensive and less productive. But it's also in this era of really caring about people and employees, which I know a lot of companies, including the one I work for, do. You don't want to. It's not healthy for them either. Okay, here's my unscheduled downtime, the great profit killer. It shouldn't be more than 5%. I know one company that I know of that uses B2W. They were in the 25 to 30% range and drove it down to 5% using B2W Maintain. And of course, that's a tool. you still have to have organizational discipline and people that understand this in your organization, but it gives you the tool to get it done, because it'd be very hard otherwise, regardless of your commitment. And we actually, I know one B2W client with a fairly sizable fleet that's driven this down to 2%, which is just outstanding. So maintenance costs versus estimated replacement value. This is a really quick indicator that a piece of equipment is getting too old and needs to be replaced. I wouldn't use just this, but it flags as for a piece of equipment, if the maintenance cost is starting to be more than 5% replacement value, you really need to look at the hours on that piece of equipment and its cost history and its repair history, and put it on the consider for replacement list. The last one is disconnected workflows. This is pulling all this together, all the previous 9 together. When you have disconnected workflows, sometimes key management won't have all the information they need in available real time. And what I mean by disconnected workflows, I'm really talking about maintenance, scheduling, and track field reporting. That they need to be working together. And I want to emphasize the individual B2W elements are all extremely valuable in their own right. I know for many years, my previous company, we only used B2W track, and we got a lot of value out of it. And then we added schedule, and we added maintain. So don't think by this comment that you have to do all 3. But what I'm telling you is, when you do all 3, and you're on the one platform, which to me is the secret sauce of B2W, you get a lot of synergy, and the efficiency and the sharing of information and the ability for management to know what's going on between the fleet and the field is really quite remarkable. And so that pulls it all together at the end. So with that, and let me just say, before I do leave one platform, just to make it clear, this is the only industry solution in the heavy highway area that has all of these things on one real-time database platform, and that's really where the power comes from. So with that, we've covered our 10 workflows, and thank you all for attending. Everybody, you know what you're supposed to do. Stay home, wash your hands, be safe, and we hope everybody on this call and your companies come out of this other side of this crisis in good shape. So thank you for attending today.